So it's T minus 11 days to go until my ADHD assessment. And can we just talk about how exhausting, if it turns out I have ADHD, who knows? But can we just talk about how exhausting an overactive brain is? Like, first off, it screws with your sleep. Something horrible. I generally do not sleep well. There have been periods of time when I've slept a lot better when I was fasting, when I was on keto, those two examples. And don't tell me it's caffeine, because I've come off that before as well, and that didn't help, coming off caffeine with the sleep quality. And frankly, when I have caffeine, very often I feel more placated and calm. I don't get that antsy kind of feeling. So sorry, there's a vacuum or something going on in the background. So that's number one. Like, having this overactive brain, it just doesn't, like, waking, you go to bed at 11:30 p.m. and then you wake up at 3:30 in the morning for some reason. You're really bright awake, but you're not going to get up then, because that'd be crazy. And then you decide to, I'll just sleep until like 6 a.m. It'd be good to get up early. And then next thing you wake up, it's 8:30 a.m. And everyone thinks, you think you're lazy for sleeping in. But it's like you haven't had any sleep. Not proper sleep anyway. And then, it builds up over time. And you get that sleep debt. And that's just, all the research will show now the importance of sleep. One of the big problems with the whole hustle movement was like, you don't need to sleep. When you get home, that 10 p.m. to 3 a.m., that's when you get to work on your passion. It's like, yeah, I get that. I get the working hard, but sleep, kind of important. I think genetically there are some people who can do with less of it, but I really don't think that's a lesson you should be taking from that. I think that might be the exception rather than the rule. And then, so that's the sleep. And then the overactive brain when you're awake. Like, because I've started doing interviews. I've done 2 interviews with people with ADHD now. And I'll release them on this channel when I've edited them down into ADHD friendly format, because they were a bit long. But just saying, you can sit on a couch and from the outside no one would know that you're doing anything, but you're not being lazy, you're not doing nothing. Your brain is going 1 billion miles an hour, right? It's like the hyperactivity, but it's internalized. Because people could look at someone like myself, for example, who doesn't really, I could sit still for a while anyway, if I had to, that's fine. But it doesn't mean my brain isn't going 1 million miles an hour, and it is so draining. In many ways, I will quite often do really intense sessions of tennis, for example, which, will take a couple of days to recover from. And that's exhausting in a way, but it's a very different feeling to when I'm exhausted from thinking or creating in particular. So the last couple of days I've been busy setting things up for this channel and the social medias, and trying to decide like a business plan, a strategy. So it's all very brain intensive. It's not admin work. It's creative work. Is it it's right brain, I think, work, not left brain work. And I find that really, really exhausting. I've had times when I've been so exhausted from that sort of work that it's weird, like I can't move. I will wake up and it's like I'm just catatonic. I can't move. I just have to, and it's weird because my body is fine, but I just cannot open my eyes. I can't keep them open, and it just feels like my brain, it's like an engine when it won't start. That's what it feels like. Brain just won't kick into gear, and no amount of coffee will bring it back to life, but the coffee just brings me back to life barely, but it doesn't kick my brain into gear. This is a weird thing with caffeine for me, and I don't know if this is part of the way that my brain works a bit differently, but you always see people talking about coffee and like you're having your jittery and you're like this. I've never had that. Never. Even one time, I will tell you, when I was trying to get through college, university, and I hadn't studied at all through the 14-week semester because, and I decided, 14 weeks, 1 hour per week of study for 14 weeks is 14 hours of study. I can do that in one day, because there are 24 hours in one day. I'm not saying this is a good idea, by the way, but that's what my brain conversation was to myself. And so I tried doing that. Well, I did that. I actually passed the exam. Thank you, hyperfocus. Thank you, craziness. Thank you, anxiety, whatever you want to call it. But to get through that night, I was drinking a lot of coffee. Not that it really did anything, but it's kind of like, it's almost like a placebo effect. I know it's not going to do anything, but it just feels like I need to have it. It almost like to bring you to baseline. Not to give you the hype, but just to give you the baseline. And I went through an entire, probably one of the smaller jars of instant coffee. I went through the whole thing in one night. And my mum's a doctor. Turns out the next day I almost had caffeine poisoning, if there is such a thing. I'd overdosed on caffeine. But caffeine doesn't make me hyper at all. It almost feels like it calms down a lot of the voices and activity going on in my head, so I can actually have a bit of room to just think productively, if that makes sense. So I don't know if you guys have any tips as to sleeping strategies or how to quiet the mind. I will say, if I do end up having ADHD when I'm assessed in 11 days, and I do try the medication, because if you remember, that's why I want to see a psychiatrist versus a psychologist, because I want the medication to be an option, because I do believe there's a strong case to be made that medication in many cases is the strongest and best way to mitigate against certain ADHD symptoms. And give it a go. What's the worst that can happen? I don't think the withdrawal symptoms are as bad as could be, coming off some antidepressants, as an example, where people have a psychotic break. I could be wrong. I don't know much. This is not scientifically backed. This is just from what I've heard. So I'm willing to give it a go. And really, I'm just, from, again, the 2 interviews that I've done and the conversations that I've had with other neurodivergents, seems to be that when you take that medication, Adderall, Ritalin, that it helps. Like my interviewee today, Clover, who's only 15 years old, she described it as noise-cancelling headphones. And I think that's such a good analogy for it. Because it's noise-cancelling headphones, but it's noise-cancelling for the noise inside your head, right? It's not to keep the noise inside your head, because actually when you put noise-cancelling headphones on, sometimes it's worse, if you've ever tried that. And I know that from doing so many interviews. Headphone fatigue, look it up, it's a real thing. But noise-cancelling headphones from the thoughts in your head. And I'm hoping that if I do go down that path, that will help somewhat with the mental exhaustion, it will help with the focus, and then maybe in some way that will help with the quality of sleep, because that'd be great. I mean, I could go back on keto, but I'm not sure that keto is the best thing to do for your health long term, because I don't believe there are any long-term studies on the effects of keto for longevity versus something like the Mediterranean diet, as an example. But I'm not going to go into nutrition. This is basically to say I am exhausted today. And not physically exhausted, just mentally. Can't get anything out of this brain whatsoever, which is really quite frustrating. But yeah, I hope you're having a good day. I got to the end of the week and I feel pretty good about what I've done this week, but I'm just exhausted now. So, got the weekend coming up, and rest and recharge. I like to take Saturdays off, and I will say I'm a bit sad because it's March now, which here in Australia means it's the end of summer. And I'm like, that sucks, because I do not like the winter. But yeah, if you have any feedback on any of this, any suggestions from me in terms of sleep or just being generally exhausted, do let me know. And I will speak to you, probably not tomorrow, I'm going to take Saturday off, as I said, but either Sunday or Monday. Take care.